Re-Zero, Side Story, Pristella Reconstruction Journal No. 4, Chapter 1.
A high-pitched metallic sound rang out, and the impact blew the dirty underground air, causing strange noises to rise. The splattering blood was black in color and had a foul odor. Garfield and Ricardo repeatedly attacked and evaded to weaken the enemy as they moved around to avoid being exposed to it. A fist and the giant serpent stabbed at the same time, and an ugly scream echoed horribly in the underground passage. "Ezo, both of you, get back." Immediately afterwards, a voice of caution was heard over the screams, and Garfield and Ricardo jumped away from the scene. After a moment's delay, Ezo released a gleaming flame that dazzled the underground. "Ezo, ui goa." The mass of flames that appeared with the chanting scorched the body of the deformity that was blocking the way. There were more screams than ever before, and the huge body of the deformity shivered violently in pain. The screams were cut short when the flames turned most of the body into charcoal. All that was left was the charred remains of the deformed body, and the foul smell of burning. "Garfield, is it dead already?" "Ricardo, oh, that was hard." The creepy-looking thing was one thing, but being too stubborn is another thing. "What the hell is this thing?" After witnessing the death of the strange figure, Garfield and Ricardo untied their battle stance. A small figure, Ezo, who passed by them and struck the death blow of magic, made a difficult face. He looked down at the charred corpse and muttered briefly, "I don't know." Ezo, it looked like it had extraordinary regenerative powers and multiple heads vying for control of a single body. Normally, it would not be possible to fight in such a state, but in the case of this variant, it was possible because it had a corresponding number of limbs and tails for multiple heads. Because of this, Liliana, yes, stop it. It's okay, we've already beaten it. For now, let's just rejoice in the fact that we've defeated the giant witch beast Pristella. Ezo, you're right. Miss Liliana has a point, Liliana suggested, frowning as she peered at the oddly shaped corpse. At her words, Ezo wrinkled his brow and nodded. He was more than a little curious about it, but, Ezo, at least we defeated this one. The original purpose of the temple is the remains of the witch, which may be found in the innermost part of the temple, so let's leave solving the mystery for later. Liliana, I thought it would be better. So, unknown, this Liliana, who was behind you cheering on your struggles with different hands, was moved by your excitement and had a flash of inspiration. Listen to me. Tem, great temple. Liliana begins to sing a new song, playing the strings of a once muddy lyre. The three men faced each other as they listened to the soul-stirring voice of the song, despite its name. After the battle with the creature, they reconfirmed their plan to attack the great temple, Garfield, but there's no way to climb up a wall that's fallen down. We're going to keep going forward at this rate. Is that unanimous, Ricardo? Well, there's no other way to put it. I was most worried about Miss Liliana, but she can't fight, but she's got a lot of guts. And, Garfield, let's see how many of those creatures are lurking up ahead. Hearing Ezo's summary, Garfield and Ricardo sighed. It was wishful thinking that there was only that one creature now, but Liliana was the only one here who was optimistic about that. Ezo, it's hard to imagine that it's a singular entity that occurred by chance. As long as it can survive in a place where almost no living thing comes and goes, it should be considered as such a life form. In other words, life forms that can live in minimal conditions without the need for food. Ricardo, can it live only with this moss and water? I wonder if it can think like that with its big body. A big body needs a lot of food. I'm proof of that, Garfield. I hate to say it, but I eat a lot of food too, though not as much as Motesso the mountain eater. Well, I don't disagree with the great sensei's point of view. Sniffing the musty underground air, Garfield searched for enemies. The strange odor coming from the shape was quite disturbing, but even so, he could at least get a feel for the area. If Garfield was frank, there was no smell of living things around. It was not practical for Garfield, who grew up in the forest, to hide himself completely from them. Ezo, these are the protectors of the temple, let's call them guardians for now. If my imagination is correct, there should be many more of these guardians lurking around. Ricardo, yeah, I'm tired. Ricardo shrugged at Ezo's speculation. In contrast to Ricardo, however, Ezo's eyes lit up and he shook his head. No way. He shook his head. Ezo, it is not a dangerous witch beast, nor is it a rare sacred beast of existence. If it did not come about naturally, then there was an unnatural creation of life. It's an unknown technique. Ricardo, it's like an unknown technique in the depths of this ancient temple. Ezo, considering the origins of Pristella, maybe it has something to do with the lost civilization from over 400 years ago. Liliana, hey. Liliana then jumped into the heated discussion with vigor. Strumming her lyre, she looked from one to the other at the men who had left her out. Liliana, what a surprise. Let's hear it for silence. If you say I'm too loud, I'll apologize. But I refuse to ignore the song. Ricardo, oh, I'm sorry, song girl. I'll listen to you sing next time. Liliana, yes. You can't be allowed to behave like that. So listen up. Liliana does not accept Ricardo's efforts to intervene, expressing her passion in sound. She jumped straight over the deformed corpse and stood at the end of the path. Then she looked back at the three of them, stomped on the ground forcefully, and, Liliana, if you want to go this way, you'll have to accompany me in my singing. That's what sincerity is all about. And now I have something to tell you, Garfield, isn't that something other than a suggestion? Liliana, I just heard a strange sound under my foot as I stepped on it. A clunk, Garfield, clunk. Liliana was sweating profusely, and everyone's eyes were drawn to her feet. Garfield looked over and saw that her right foot had sunk one step deeper, as if the floor had sunk. The next moment, behind Garfield and the others, a sound came from the falling wall. A faint but steadily approaching tremor signals its approach to us. It was, Ezo, a trap of some kind guides the intruder to activate the device. For example, you can step on something, press against a wall, and so on. In other words, Garfield, this is no time to be talking. With Ezo beginning to lecture, Garfield and the others ran as fast as they could through the underground passage. Ricardo picked up Liliana on the way, and the four of them ran to get away from the cause of the shaking. A huge ball that was rolling behind them.
Chapter 2.
After that, traps blocking the intruder's advance and the Guardian's interference occurred again and again. At first, the Guardians that Garfield and his companions encountered looked like a collection of rats, but they were preceded by a giant creature that looked like a fusion of a winged insect and a dog, or a mucus-like organism with no distinction between head and body. The traps ranged from basic forms such as pitfalls and projectiles, to dissolving liquids that dissolved everything they touched, and cursed techniques that made them become one with the walls. The four of them managed to get through all of it by working together, sometimes getting along, and using the power of song to lift their spirits. And then, Ricardo, that's enough of that. You asshole. The barking Ricardo swung the big machete down and slammed his opponent's arm hard into the floor. As the arm struck by the big machete buried itself in the ground, Ricardo let go of the big machete and ran up the arm. The owner of the arm, a guardian whose entire body is made of stone, has Ricardo's right arm plunged into its head. The hook that had been attached in place of his missing arm shattered the guardian's head, causing the stone giant to lose his fighting strength and fall to his knees on the spot. The huge body collapsed with a loud noise, and Ricardo kicked the body and howled in victory. Looking up at the howling Ricardo, Garfield and Ezo also clapped their hands together and praised each other's good fight. Liliana, well, this is the fifth guardian. Is it time to call it a day? Ezo, to be honest, I have no idea. But I hope so. After all, it's just one battle after another. I'm not sure how much mana I have left. Using a wooden stick she found somewhere as a cane, the exhausted Liliana asked, to which Ezo could not give her an optimistic answer. It had already been more than 6 hours since they started attacking the temple, but they hadn't been able to find the end point at all. This was bizarre, since the group must have walked a considerable distance. Garfield, in addition to the fact that we fell long ways in the first place, we also lost our bearings because we ran all over the place to escape the iron ball. Garfield, I don't blame you for anything. Besides, gnashing his teeth at Liliana, who was holding her chest, Garfield turned to face the wall. Then, he pressed his palm against that moss-covered wall and scraped off the dirt. As Garfield did so, a pattern that had been hidden by moss appeared on the dirty wall of the underground passage. No, it's not a pattern, it's letters. Garfield, I've been wondering about this thing that keeps flashing back and forth for a while now. Ricardo, well, didn't you say something pretty cute? What do you care about this graffiti? Garfield, yeah. Garfield crossed his arms in response to Ricardo's question as he stepped down from the top of the giant stone figure. Peeking at the wall from behind him, Ezo muttered, "Oh, this," as if he was satisfied. "Ezo, this is an ancient script that is often found in ruins. Most of them have been scratched off, and the writing is too irregular to analyze, so it's considered difficult. For the most part, this is usually seen as graffiti or a pattern, as Ricardo says." Garfield, I know I've seen this somewhere before. Ezo? Garfield Dono, do you have a hobby of diving in ruins? Garfield, that's not what I meant. I thought I saw it in a more normal place. Twisting his head, Garfield pondered. But no answer came to him. He felt a burning sensation in his memory, and he groaned and scratched his head. Garfield, I can't think of anything. It's so vague, my head itches. Ezo, it's interesting to hear you say that you recognize the ancient script. But perhaps you're mistaken. Déjà vu is something that can happen to anyone. Liliana, oh, those letters are similar to a Daiku score. Strange coincidences do happen. Ezo, oh, yes. Much like the Daiku score. What? Despite the fact that Garfield scratched his head, he couldn't remember. It was Liliana who looked at the letters and said those words. She looked at the surprised face of Ezo and tilted her head. What? At such a tilt of Liliana's head, Ezo tilted his head in the same way and, Ezo, what did you say, Miss Liliana? If I'm not mistaken, it was a statement that I thought you said you recognized the writing on this wall. Liliana, no, I've seen a lookalike before. A Daiku score is a special cryptogram that is only handed down to bards. To be frank, bardic singing is the source of their livelihood, so they devise various ways to prevent people from stealing it easily. So they use a Daiku score to pass down the old songs. Ezo, you think that's what these letters look like? Liliana, yes. Well, there are strange coincidences, aren't there? Ezo Summer. Liliana smiled and replied, and Ezo grabbed her hard by the shoulders. Then he opened his eyes with a snap and looked right into Liliana's eyes. Liliana, isn't it a big discovery? Why are you so blurry, Ezo? UAE, yeah. Liliana turned her eyes to Ezo, who shouted loudly. As he rocked her back and forth by her shoulders, Ezo's face reddened with excitement. He spoke up. Ezo, ancient letters inscribed on ruins from ancient times. These were said to be impossible to decipher, but if they could be deciphered, various civilizations that were lost in this age might be revived. I see, bards. This is a contact point that was overlooked because these people were not supposed to go in and out of the ruins. Liliana, or Ricardo, oh, calm down, sensei. You're making the little diva girl's eyes roll. Grabbing Ezo's excited head, Ricardo waits for the momentum to be broken. Poor, wobbly Liliana with her eyes rolling, Garfield supports her, and Ezo coughs in embarrassment. Ezo, I'm sorry, I got excited. But the historical value is immeasurable. Garfield, yeah, guess you're right. I know, because my amazing self is very interested in it too. Garfield agreed with Ezo's words. And then he looked again at the ancient writing on the wall, and tried to think about the unknowable people of hundreds of years ago. Immediately afterwards, a huge stone fist rammed into Garfield from behind, smashing the letters all over the wall. Garfield, what? When Garfield turned around at the impact of the blow to his shoulder, he saw that it was a stone giant who had lost its head that had fired the fist. The giant is still missing its head and is slowly pulling back its fist it slammed into Garfield. Garfield, did you just pretend to be dead? You don't even have a brain. Liliana, now. My head was grazed? Liliana, who was stunned by the fist that grazed her head, hid behind Ricardo, who returned to his fighting stance. Next to her, Garfield and Ezo were stunned by the shattered walls of the ruins. An unexpected encounter with the ancient world was shattered by the guardian of the temple. Ezo, my anger at you now is momentary, but it exceeds Roswell. Guardians. You'll never get out of here alive. Enraged, Ezo's arms lit up and two magics, fire and wind, were created. Combining them to create a flaming tornado is Roswell's specialty, but it would be wise not to tell Ezo, who is about to do the same thing. It was more than that, because Garfield was angry, too. And so, a fight to the death begins with the vigor of a mythical battle, as Liliana performs against a deadly stone giant. Just before that, Garfield suddenly remembered. Garfield, oh, yeah, the captain's room. Ancient letters that Garfield could not remember where he had them seen before. It was in Subaru's room in the mansion that Garfield saw similar characters. It was not unusual for Subaru to keep a diary once in a while, but when Garfield entered the room where he was writing, he happened to see those words on the page he was looking at. Garfield wondered if it was some kind of game, because he couldn't read the letters, but, Garfield, oh rah-ah, leaving that behind for now, Garfield raised his fist and challenged the giants. After a series of confrontations with the Guardians, the group slowly and gradually made their way deeper into the temple. They were only one step away from the deepest part, the location of the witch's remains.